Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy DeYoung. Welcome to Prophecy Today video. Much of the focus on our broadcast today is going to be the new Obama nuclear strategy, along with the United States and Russia signing a nuclear arms treaty this last week, and President Obama's nuclear summit in Washington, D.C. There are concerns, as well there should be, about Obama's nuclear strategy. Colonel Bob Maginnis out of Washington says that Russia benefits from this new approach by the Obama administration.
In my opinion, it really is an achievement for the Russians because they couldn't afford a sizable arsenal, much less the aircraft and the missiles, and so they got a major reduction. And by the way, Medvedev, the president of Russia, said in Prague just the other day that if your anti-ballistic missile program, U.S., continues to advance, we may, pull out of this particular treaty. So there are a lot of concerns about the way ahead with this regard.
Bob Maginnis thinking about Russia as a key player in the world scene today, but also prophetically, Russia, which is the Magog of Ezekiel chapter 38, a key player for the future as it relates to the scenario laid out in God's prophetic word. David Dolan reports from the Middle East, and he says that the Israeli Prime Minister was concerned about the summit being used against Israel.
We have had, in the case of Egypt in particular, the last few years, a focus or an attempt to focus on Israel's reported nuclear arsenal, and we can say now that Israel does have such an arsenal because the former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert did admit that. Egypt since then has been saying that the UN needs to discuss this, possible sanctions against Israel for having nuclear weapons. Well, the truth is they've had them since the mid-'60s, so this isn't a new thing, and they've never used them, obviously, and they've never threatened direct use of them on a neighbor, unlike Iran that supposedly doesn't yet have them and is already saying that Israel will be obliterated as a country in one fell swoop.
David Dolan talking about the fact that Israel has nuclear weapons, or at least that is what everybody expects. These nuclear weapons, somewhat of a deterrent. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But the fact is, this is setting the stage for an alignment of nations, and we'll get deeper into that as well in just a moment here on Prophecy Today video. Dr. Rob Congdon is our man who focuses on the European Union, all of Europe, and Rob said the signing of the nuclear arms treaty in Prague, Czech Republic, and the private mini-summit following that was actually a slap at the European Union by President Obama.
It's almost like consciously or unconsciously we're trying to divide the European Union, and I think in trying to say that, it's an attempt to diminish the role of the EU, and that's exactly how the EU is viewing it. They feel they've been snubbed. They feel that here they're trying to establish a foreign department, a diplomatic corps, and say, look, when you want to speak to Europe, you speak to the EU and its foreign policy leader, Ashton, and, of course, its President, Van Rompuy. Instead, they are ignored. They aren't even part of this, and it's like an appeal to the Eastern European countries and sort of saying, forget the West.
Of course, the European Union, at least the infrastructure for the revived Roman Empire, talked about in the book of Daniel, chapter 2, with the 10 toes of iron and clay, and also chapter 7 of the book of Daniel, the 10 horns on the last of the great empires, the Roman Empire. And that is a look from our broadcast partners across the world, looking at current events as they set the stage for Bible prophecy to be fulfilled. But let me focus, if you will, on Israel. The reality that Israel has a nuclear arsenal is indeed a deterrent, but it's not the scenario that divine protection will give to the Jewish people according to Bible prophecy. And let's think that through. The question about Israel's nuclear capability has been on the minds of the leaders of the world recently, but of great interest to the Arab and Islamic nations of the Middle East for decades. Israel has used the policy of ambiguity pertaining to its nuclear arsenal as the main deterrent to keep their neighbors from attacking them with full force, basically an all-out war against the Jewish state. This new Obama nuclear policy and the recently signed nuclear arms treaty between the United States and Russia has actually set the stage for exposing the truth about Israel's nuclear program. David Dolan did mention that he believed the former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert did give a definite statement that Israel does have an arsenal of nuclear weapons. Now, there's still some question as to whether that was the case or not. The change of mind, however, by the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, in attending Obama's nuclear summit furthers the intrigue of this whole subject. Bible prophecy adds to the discussion as well, as it lays out a scenario where the Arab and Islamic nations will form a coalition and align themselves against the Jewish state of Israel. When you go to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38, you will see a list of nations that come together. Interestingly, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, verse 2 of Ezekiel 38 says, Gog in the land of Magog. Now, Gog is the leader. We do not know who that is. I'm not going to even suppose to tell you who I may think it is, but Magog, according to biblical geography, can be determined to be the nation of Russia today. That is going to be the leading nation in this alignment of nations that will come against the Jewish state of Israel. As you go through the passage, you see in verse 5, Persia. Well, Persia is the name that was three nations in 1936, and up until that time, that's been changed. Today they're known as Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. They also mention in verse 5 Ethiopia, and they mention Libya. That would be, of course, Ethiopia, Somalia, and Sudan. When you look geographically, biblical geography I'm talking about, at that country we know today as Ethiopia, but Libya, that's Colonel Gaddafi, and he's, by the way, calling a meeting of all of the Israeli Arab leaders in Libya. Tripoli, Libya will be the headquarters where they're going to be talking about their strategy for the future. Psalm 83 mentions additional states like Saudi Arabia and Lebanon. When you go to Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 to 45, you see also mentions Syria and Egypt. These are the players, the nations that will come together. It mentions in Ezekiel chapter 38 in verse 2 and verse 6, Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, and Togarmah. That's modern-day Turkey. All of these nations in our discussions as we talk about an alignment of nations coming against the state of Israel. This Islamic alignment of nations will attack the Jewish state at a time of peace to follow a peace agreement that will be put together by the Antichrist. And that's found in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. And he, this Antichrist, this tyrant, shall confirm a covenant. That's the peace treaty with many. That would be Israel and its Jewish and its other neighbors. With Israel and these neighbors signing this peace treaty, or it being confirmed, peace treaties that are already on the table, that sets the stage for the peace of Israel to be in place, so they will be dwelling safely in the land, according to Ezekiel 38, 8, and 11. This pseudo-peace set up by the Antichrist will provide the opportunity for this alignment of nations to come against the Jewish state. However, Israel will not be protected at that time of that attack by nuclear weapons, but instead from the heavenlies as the Lord intercedes to save the Jewish state from total destruction. That's found in Ezekiel chapter 38, verses 18 through chapter 39, verse 6, when 5 out of 6 of every one of those attacking nations and all of their peoples will be destroyed. Basically, the Islamic world rendered inoperative. It's not going to be nuclear weapons. It may start with a nuclear battle in the beginning of that fight against the Jewish state of Israel, but the Lord intercedes out of the heavenlies with his power to destroy these attackers of the Jewish state of Israel. Nuclear weapons in the Middle East will not stop Bible prophecy from being fulfilled. Bible prophecy indeed will be fulfilled. Nuclear weapons are not. The next event on God's calendar of activities, remember, is the rapture of the church. Jesus shouts, the archangel shouts, trump of God sounds, and those of us who know Christ as Lord and Savior leave this world and move into the heavenlies with Him. And you know, that rapture could happen at any moment. And after everything we've said on this time together with you, there's nothing left for me to say except let's keep looking up until